Hi, I'm Joe Lovano, and it's time to connect with me and John Krychek.
Hey, Joe Lovano, man, how are you doing? Good morning.
I'm doing great. Yeah, John, thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect. It's an honor to meet you, and it's an honor to have you here on Time to Connect. So, looking forward to chatting with you. Are you coming to us from New York? I'm guessing.
Yeah, I live in the Hudson River Valley, about 1 hour north of Manhattan.
Hmm.
It's kind of a rainy, drizzly day, but it's beautiful.
I've noticed in talking to a lot of folks on this series that a lot of New York-based musicians do live up to the north there. I guess it's an easy train ride for you, but it's a little easier living than living in the city.
Well, I moved to New York in the mid 70s and didn't really come up here for about 30 years. And now at this time in my life, it's really nice to have a space in the woods, and where we are is really a peaceful situation. And I have a studio that I could really play 24 hours in. Uh,
Nice.
in Manhattan, I had a loft on 23rd Street and 7th Avenue for over 25 years. And I was so fortunate to have this space during that time in my life from my early 20s on. And I could play with drummers till midnight in that
Mhm.
spot, and create my own situations also to happen. You know, all of the people in my life through the years that I've played with and explored music with all played at my loft. And it was an amazing period for me. But at this point, it's nice to be out and meditate out here in the woods.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. I mean, you've pretty much played with everybody. Speaking of people playing with you, and I want to get to some of that. I want to get to the new record that you did with Jakob Bro, honoring Paul Motian. A lot I want to get to, but I have to start by wishing you happy birthday. You just turned 70, is that right?
Ooh, isn't that something? Wow. It's been an amazing journey, man. And
Yeah.
I'm really so proud to have such an amazing lifetime in the music. And it's really all about your relationships through the years. And it's just been fantastic, and
Yeah.
it is a celebration about life,
Yeah.
every day along your journey, you know, and if you can reflect on that as you move into tomorrow, you're always in that moment of now, in reflection and projection,
Yeah.
I've kind of I live like that. That's how I live, and Judy and I live together like that
Beautiful.
uh, that kind of embrace.
That's
Mhm.
beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Well, I'm not too far behind you. I'll be 67 here pretty soon, and I don't know about you, but I can't believe it got here so quickly. Time flies, I think, whether you're having fun or not.
Things
But yeah,
move right along. They sure do.
but yeah, I think you're right, man. It's a celebration. It's a congratulations. You know, you made it to 70. That's fantastic. How are you feeling at 70? Are you starting to slow down at all? It doesn't look like it by all the gigs you have lined up this year.
I've had a pretty amazing year in 2022, exploring all kinds of different music and ways of playing. And I feel I'm just starting to really scratch the surface about developing more of a personal way of playing within whatever piece of music that I'm dealing with, and that feels really good. And it's an ongoing development that I think keeps you young,
Yeah,
when you're like developing from within your experiences and relationships all the time.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, being open to new things, even though you've had an incredible life and you've done so many things. It sounds like you're still open to new ways. And I don't know about you, but I think that's one of the keys to staying young and at heart and spirit is we're not fully cooked yet, man. We're still a work in progress. Yeah.
Well, as time goes on, you realize you're representing yourself and you're representing your feelings about all the folks that you've encountered, throughout your lifetime. As a musician, when you're really young, in your teenage years, you're starting to develop around older players and folks that are your mentors, and you're in the audience for a long time. But then at a certain point, if you're really serious and you develop within the beauty of the music, all of a sudden, like people are in your audience, and that embrace just keeps building and building. And throughout your whole lifetime, whether when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, now I could look back on that,
Yeah.
having the embrace of the folks that I did was all a springboard into the future. And that's still going on today, with the young cats that I address in the world of jazz education. You're realizing more and more every day that you're addressing the future of the music by just being yourself and talking about your personal journey. Because everyone has a personal journey in the music and in the people that you play with. And for me, right now, at my age and moment today, I'm reflecting on all these things that are inspiring, and all of the good in humanity and in the world of music. You don't just live in a small little box. You're living the world of music as you develop as a jazz musician in the art of improvising.
Mhm.
You're dealing with all kinds of different feelings, sounds and feelings.
Well said, man. You're an inspiration. Now you mentioned looking back. One question I like to ask my guests is, what were you like as a kid? Look back, and I know you had a father who was a jazz musician. You maybe didn't have any chance of not becoming a musician growing up and seeing having serious cats playing right in front of you when you were just a kid, and I'm sure that was hugely influential on you. But let me just back up. What were you like as a kid?
Well, I was real curious about all kinds of things, and I grew up in an amazing household with a lot of music, and a lot of love, Sicilian family. All four of my grandparents came from Sicily, and so I'm second generation. And my dad and all of my uncles on my dad's side all played music. On my mom's side, there was like such a deep appreciation of the music, and my mom went and heard my dad play and opened for Stan Getz and Flip Phillips and others when they were engaged. My Aunt Rose, my mom's youngest sister, was a real hipster and a flipster. She went to jazz at the Philharmonic and heard Ella Fitzgerald and Lester Young, and she could sing Illinois Jacquette's solo on Flying Home, for example. So I kind of grew up with this amazing, like natural household about the music, and it was during this, they came up during the swing era and into the bebop and modern jazz periods, So I grew up around an amazing record collection, and as well as my grandmothers sang and had this other element of folk music and opera also. I didn't know my grandfathers, but both of my grandmothers were they had a musical flow in the way they lived and talked, you know. uh, so all of us, my sister Laura played piano. I'm the oldest. My sister Laura played piano. My brother Patrick was next. He played trumpet for a little while. And my brother Anthony today is one of the leading drummers around Cleveland, I would say, and in a real funky blues style. And, you know, his bands and the gigs that are happening around Cleveland for him that he's created. He has a few different bands, and I go and sit in, and we play together a lot, you know. Just on my 70th little birthday hit in Cleveland at a club called the Bop Stop, I put on a concert with a bunch of Cleveland All-Stars, I would say, you know, and my wife Judy also. When we went back, we put a set of original music together, and then a second set of more of a jam session with some local folks, you know.
Nice.
But my brother and Anthony played duets, tenor and drums, and improvised some music together in dedication to my mom and dad and family, you know, and the way we grew up. And yeah, it was real magical when I was a kid, you know, because as a teenager, I was hearing all this music. My dad's record collection was fantastic. You know, he heard Charlie Parker live. He heard Coltrane and Miles and Thelonious Monk, you know, played in jam sessions with Gene Ammons and others, you know. Wow. So he like had a lot of stories about all kinds of things. So that whole myths and legends about the music and the people was part of my early development and understanding about the music and about the people that were playing it. You know, I heard Rahsaan Roland Kirk when I was like 15, 16 years old. And man, you know, James Moody and certain other cats who played flutes and different horns. And man, everything, I was sent to the woodshed every time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Was there ever any doubt for you from the time you came to consciousness? Did you know you were going to be a musician?
Well, you know, I never even thought about it, man. I was into it, you know. Yeah. And of course I was like into sports as well.
Yeah.
Our neighborhood, I grew up in Euclid, Ohio, which was like one of the first suburbs outside of Cleveland. And our neighborhood was full of all kinds of kids my age and you know, within that 5-10 year range, you know. Mm-hmm. So we had 2 baseball teams that we could play with just kids in the neighborhood. We played football and baseball and basketball, and there was a lot of sports also growing up, you know. Mm-hmm. So there was a real neighborhood thing happening also with friends that I still am in touch with today that weren't musicians, you know. But I would slip away and go to the woodshed. You know what that means when you go to the woodshed.
Oh yeah.
Go where no one could hear you. And you work things out. Right. Now, I also had my mom and Aunt Rose upstairs, like my practice scene. I had the whole basement of our house where I had a desk and drums and a piano and my horns and my dad's instruments. So my mom and my Aunt Rose really heard me practicing and trying to have an understanding of the music and the songs, because all of my lessons with my dad were technical lessons about the music, the elements in the music, but also when he showed me things in certain keys, he taught me tunes in those keys and melodies by ear. So I was studying and starting to learn all these melodic inventive melodies, you know,
Mm-hmm.
within the songbook. And my mom and Aunt Rose knew all those tunes. So they would be correcting me. Oh, no, that's not right. You know, they'd open the basement door and they'd make comments, you know. But so it was like I was always had a feeling of performance.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back on it now, I didn't realize it then.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back on it now, when I was working on certain tunes, I was playing for them also.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big part of it, man.
Mm-hmm.
My lessons with my dad led me to feel the confidence to go and sit in with his groups as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
and to play and try to have the embrace of the cats he was playing with, his rhythm sections, people in his generation, you know, as well as playing with friends of mine through the high school years. You know, I was in all the orchestras and some choirs and things as a kid, you know, in elementary school and junior high into high school, and playing in the symphonic bands and things, you know. So it was an amazing young, very, very curious about a lot of things in the music, you know.
Man, what a life. So
It was fun. I have to say it was fun too.
Yeah, man.
I didn't really ever feel like I was struggling with things, you know.
Yeah.
Even though I was, you know, technically, like to get around your horn, you had to practice.
Right.
The work,
Yeah.
you work. But it was a joy because when my dad would come home, my dad was a barber also. He was a professional player on the scene and one of the leaders on the scene in Cleveland, from the time he came home from the service through his lifetime. You know, he passed in 1987, pretty young, but throughout the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, especially, he was working 5-6 nights a week all the time, you know. And we were talking and reflecting on that with some folks back in Cleveland just now for the holidays about how back then there were clubs. My dad would play 6 nights a week in the same club for like 6 months.
Wow.
And there were rotating other groups that also, you know, they would change rooms that they would play in, but the gigs would last a long time, like more some supper clubs and some listening rooms and supper club kind of vibes, you know, real nightclub atmospheres.
Yeah.
So as a teenager, once I started getting my driver's license and be able to be on my own, I would go and sit in with not only my dad's groups, but other groups that were playing around Cleveland at the time, you know, a lot of organ groups, you know. Not many places had great pianos, but there were a lot of rooms where there was B3s and cats would bring they'd drive up to the club with their B3 and set up at the corner tavern and turn it into a space, you know? And it was all about jazz. It was all about the music, you know? At that age for me, especially, you know, throughout my high school years, that was something else, man.
You mentioned some amazing players. If you were forced to mention just a few musicians who inspired you, whether sax or not, who comes to mind of those, you know, that elite group for you who inspired you?
Well, you know, before I met anybody, like just from recordings.
Yeah.
Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker. Lester Young. Ben Webster. Gene Ammons. Sonny Stitt. Art Blakey and Max Roach. You know, and then, you know, when you name those names, okay, you say Art Blakey, you're listening to him, but you're also listening to Benny Golson and Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter, and Cedar Walton, Tommy, you know, Bobby Timmons, you know. Also with Max, you know, Clifford Brown and Sonny.
Right.
My dad had records with those folks on, you know, because he was hip to what was happening, and he heard those peoples.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, you know, during that time in the late 40s and 50s, a lot of cats traveled as solo players. Okay, like Charlie Parker would come to Cleveland and play with a local rhythm section.
Right. Yeah.
And the cats he would be playing with were people that my dad was playing with. So as a kid, I started to meet a bass player. His name was Richard Mitchell, who played with Bird, you know. And my dad would say, "Oh yeah, he played with Charlie." And it was like almost a fantasy world, you know, but it was real.
Yeah.
You know, my dad took me one time to hear Gene Ammons. I think it was 1970 or so. It was a club called Syrah's House. And they would have headliners like once a month or so, you know. Local cats would play on the off weeks. So it was one of those places my dad played, but every, you know, 2 or 3 weeks they'd have Sonny Stitt, or they'd have Gene Ammons or something, Jimmy Smith, you know. My dad took me once to hear Gene Ammons, and it was amazing to be in a room with his sound and way of playing, the way he addressed and led the band, right? The way he addressed the audience and with his powerful presentation. I was like a senior in high school or something, you know. Wow. And on the break, my dad took me and my close friend Ron Smith, who played vibes. And Ron and I ended up going to Berkeley together like the next year. But anyway, we were there, and on the break, my dad takes us to the dressing room, which was like the kitchen behind the stage or something, you know.
Sort of like the Village.
Yeah, kind of like the Vanguard. You know, this is my memory of it, you know. But it was there was a little area behind the stage. And my dad took us in there, and I saw him and Gene Ammons embrace each other like they knew each other from before. So this is in 1970, so they probably had met in the early 50s or something, you know. Anyway, they said hello to each other, and I was like, what? You know, I couldn't believe it. Like, but it made everything so real for me.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Gene Ammons was not just this mythical, powerful musician and player. He was real.
Yeah. And I'm sure that made it feel more possible for you too.
Well, it definitely gave me a lot of confidence and awareness about the humanity and life. And because Jug went through a lot of struggles in his life, you know, and so did so many folks. With all the racial problems and situations that's still going on today, you know. And to see that, I learned a lot of lessons that night.
Yeah. Well, man, as I said, you've played with pretty much everybody. I mean, it's easy to go online and see, but I'll just list a few people that, I mean, Mel Lewis, Woody Herman, John Scofield, Lonnie Smith, Bill Frisell, Paul Motian, Jim Hall, John Abercrombie, Ornette Coleman, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, Dave Holland, on and on and on. It's incredible, man. I actually saw you, Joe, on one of my first trips to New York. If I'm not mistaken, it was, I don't know when in the 70s, but I'm pretty sure it's in the 70s. Is that about the time that you were playing with the Mel Lewis Big Band at the Village Vanguard?
I joined Mel's band 1980.
80. So it must have been early 80s.
Yeah, if it was with Mel at the Vanguard. You know, I moved to New York really in 76 or so.
Okay.
I had been coming to New York 1974 and 5, playing with Dr. Lonnie Smith.
Yes.
Brother Jack McDuff. And then I moved to New York, and I got the gig with Woody's band.
Right.
76, I was 23 and stayed on the band almost 3 years. And that was like, that was incredible. To have Woody's embrace and also be there during his 40th anniversary year was 1976. And there was a big concert at Carnegie Hall that we played as the band played, and I was featured on some pieces. It was recorded for RCA, but Stan Getz and Flip Phillips and Jimmy Giuffre and Zoot Sims and Al Cohn and the Condoli brothers and Jake Hanna and Don Lemon on drums and Chubby Jackson, all these cats, Phil Wilson and the all stars from Woody's life, from the 30s on, were all the soloists, main soloists on the concert. We played all the parts, and the four brothers, with Zoot and Al and Stan and Jimmy Giuffre played, the solos. But I had a chance to play my part on Early Autumn and walk to the microphone and play with Stan Getz playing lead.
Wow.
It's emotional to think about it.
Yeah.
His sound, his tone, the quality of his tone and his sound about the way he played. So beautiful. I just didn't want to play my notes. I wanted to have him feel my feeling somehow in the way I played my notes, Those were lessons from my dad. And I have to say that moment just has carried on for me. Through the years.
That's beautiful, Joe. That's beautiful. As long as we're going to get a little emotional, let's talk about Paul Motian a little bit. I know you have a new record that's a tribute. You and Jakob did that. Talk about Paul and what he's meant to you, how you started playing with him, and maybe talk a little bit about the Once Around the Room record, if you will.
Well, hearing Paul on record with Bill Evans and Keith Jarrett's band, with the trio with Scott LaFaro and Gary Peacock, and to know that music early on and to embrace that way of playing and having a collective concept within the band, that direction was always there for me in a way where I was like enchanted by it, not just to just play a solo, but to try to really be within the inner music. So going to Berkeley after high school in 1971, I heard the Keith Jarrett Quartet at the Jazz Workshop. I guess it was 1972, maybe. That record, not Live Evil. I heard Miles with the Live Evil band also, that same period, 1971, 72. Which that was another amazing thing, to be in a room with Miles for the first time. And that particular band with Keith on piano and keyboards and Jack DeJohnette. That was the first time I heard Keith really in a room. But then hearing the quartet with Charlie Hayden and Dewey Redman and Paul, shortly after that time I heard him with Miles. Keith's way of playing, his direction, was so spontaneous, and the way it unfolded, it was like he was playing really totally in the moment of now, and projecting all kinds of things, So those are the cats I wanted to aspire to try to play with, or somehow, because I realized, okay, we're on this is the scene, that this is, and some of the most inspired players, so that was that sent me to the woodshed and had me thinking about all kind of things, and I started to play with Paul 10 years later. Similar thing happened with Mel Lewis also. 1970, the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band came to Cleveland, played at Severance Hall. And to hear that band, I was still in high school at the time, to hear that band, Jerry Dodgen, Jerome Richardson, Eddie Daniels, Joe Farrell, Pepper Adams in the saxophone section, Richard Davis, Mel, Sir Roland Hanna, Snooky Young. I mean, that band was just like phenomenal, and they were being played on the radio a lot in Cleveland. There was a 24-hour jazz station during that period, 92.3, that I listened to every day growing up, right? Yeah. But anyway, they were playing a lot of the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis. So this concert was a big concert, and I went with my friends, Ron Smith once again, and Frank Doblikar, saxophone player who lives in Kingston now, and we all went. And man, that was like, really? I had heard the music, but then when you really feel it, penetrates you. I was like, how am I going to get myself together to play in that band someday? 10 years later, I joined the Mel Lewis band in 1980, because it sends you to the woodshed, and that means you're working on some things, practicing and trying to develop a way of playing and a flow from what inspires you, from what you hear and what you embrace, as a young cat. So that happened at the same time for me with Mel Lewis and Paul Motian.
Mm. So, what year did you start playing with Paul?
1981.
Okay.
And with Mel was 1980.
Right.
And they were friends. Paul was at the first, they were tight, man. Paul was at the first Monday night of the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band in 1966. When they first played that first Monday, which was, they didn't know it was going to carry on. That's still going on today, Monday nights.
Yeah.
Jazz Orchestra.
Yeah.
Paul was at that first night. And when Judy and I got married, this is just a little anecdote here, 1984, Mel played the Foxtrots and Paul played the Tarantella and the Horace at our wedding.
Wow.
That was amazing.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
Oh yeah, a lot of fun,
When did the trio, and I know it didn't start as a trio, with Paul and Bill start?
That was also around 1984.
Okay.
The trio emerged from a quintet.
Yeah.
Band started. My first playing with Paul was really quartet with Mark Johnson on bass.
Right.
Bill Frisell and myself. The first rehearsal and moment I went and met Paul really and played with him. I mean, I had met him the year before, but Mark Johnson was playing with Bill Evans, and Bill had passed. And Mark was on the Mel Lewis band at that time also in 1980, late 80s, 81. And one Monday night, Mark says, "Hey man, Paul's was asking me about you, and he, would you like to come up and play at his pad this Friday?" So I went up and played some quartet with Paul and Bill, because they were rehearsing as a trio, but Paul wanted to have a quartet at that moment. He wanted a saxophone. And from that first time we played, I played with Paul for 30 years till his passing in 2011. And shortly, we might have played a couple rehearsals with Mark. Mark got called by Stan Getz to go on the road, and he gave him a huge itinerary, whole year. And Paul didn't have any gigs, He was putting his new band together and had some possibilities for some stuff in Europe, So I recommended Ed Schuler Gunther Schuler's, one of Gunther Schuler's sons, who I was real close with, and Eddie Schuler. And Eddie came up, and Paul loved him and knew Gunther also. You know, there was some relationships going on there, you know. And then Paul, at a certain point, decided he wanted to have a quintet with two saxophones. I think he might have had the feeling, I thought he had the feeling that with one saxophone, it felt like it was my band or something. We played. With two saxophones playing in a collective sound, kind of like what Elvin did with his first, you know, his encounters with his first bands with Dave Liebman and Steve Grossman, and a few different other situations with Frank Foster and Joe Farrell, and having two horns in the front line, and you play in a collective kind of flowing way. The music takes some other kind of shapes, you know? So Billy Drews came in, who played alto and tenor, and one of my closest friends and people. We were at Berkeley together, also in Boston, where I first met Scofield and Frisell and Joey Barron and Kenny Werner, a whole host of folks.
Gary Burton.
Yeah, well, I had a chance to be in one of Gary's ensembles, and also with John Laporta, Andy McKee, Joe Viola. There was a handful of them. Herb Pomeroy, some real mentors that I encountered in those early 70s, you know, in Boston, and relationships with folks that carry on today, you know. But like Bill and I first played together back then. Yeah. Anyway, Billy Drews came in, and we had this quintet, and we went to Europe and did the first record with Paul called Psalm on ECM. And that group lasted for a while, and then Jim Pepper came in on tenor. Paul was hearing a different sound, and he had played with Charlie Hayden and Liberation Music Orchestra, which had a resurgence right at that time in the mid-'80s. And Pepper was part of that band. And Pepper was an amazing musician, man, a saxophone player. It was an American Indian from Oklahoma, you know, and a real powerful voice, and an incredible cat, man.
Yeah.
With a real spirit, you know. He had a real spirit about him. And when Pepper was in the band, it took on some other kind of shapes. We did a handful of recordings on Soul Note, and the trio really emerged during the period when Pepper was in the band. In like '84, we were on a tour, and on one tune, Pepper played a real powerful solo with Eddie and Bill and Paul. And when it ended, Eddie dropped out, and I came in with Bill and changed the atmosphere of the piece of music we were in, and it went on to a whole other kind of world, you know, a different mood, a different approach. And after the set, Paul said he had some new music and he wanted to play just with the trio at my pad. And that turned into the recording. It should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was the first trio record, and then the trio sustained all those years, man.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible. We explored so many compositions and tunes and ways of playing together. And sometimes with Charlie Hayden, there was a couple Broadway records with Charlie as a quartet, one with Lee Konitz as a quintet.
Right.
One with Lee was far out because Paul and Lee played together with Lenny Tristano, you know. So they went back and real deep, you know.
I'll tell you, one of my personal favorites is that you did with Bill and Paul is I Have the Room Above Her. What a great record. That is a beautiful record.
Well, that was one of the last ECM sessions that we did. And this recent release with Jakob Bro,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
well, the cover
Yes.
is really reminiscent of the cover of I Have the Room Above Her.
That was intentional.
Well, after we did the whole thing, I mean, Manfred's a master of post-production and all these things,
Yeah.
and he felt like the connection with Paul was so strong, with my relationships with Paul through the years. And then Jakob started to play with Paul also, I guess around 2003 or so, in some more of his electric bands,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Paul really loved Jakob's approach and person, and so they had a nice. I heard them at the Vanguard also. I think with Chris Potter and some other folks in one of Paul's other groups, because Paul at the time he wasn't traveling, and he presented a lot of different bands in New York at the Vanguard. He might have played the Vanguard every 6 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or every other month with a different group. But then the trio had our 2 weeks that we had been doing, that we did for over 10 years, every year, But anyway, hooking up with Jakob, with my relationship with Manfred and starting to record for ECM with my Trio Tapestry,
Mm-hmm.
we decided to kind of co-lead a project. And most of all the players played with Paul. Larry Grenadier, Thomas Morgan, Anders Christensen, 3 bass players. Joey Barron and Jorge Rossi were definitely in Paul's audience their whole lives. And then Paul was in their audience. They had relationships with Paul too, like coming and hearing him and hanging out and meeting him and all, through the years. So we decided to kind of do a tribute to him, but not like a tribute, really, like the play from the inspiration and all the spirits.
Yeah.
What's happening and what happened and what, what it could be,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I've been saying that as it could, one of my tunes is As It Should Be, and just that whole idea about creating music together.
Yeah.
In the compositions. So I wrote pieces, Jakob wrote pieces for the date, and we played one of Paul's signature tunes, drum music, which we used to play as a theme all the time.
Mm-hmm. And is that Joey playing on that one?
Joey and Jorge.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's a full band sound on every tune.
Yeah.
But we break down into intimate moments.
Yeah.
Then,
Well, Joe, I'm conscious of time. We're already reached about 45 minutes, which is usually the limit of these things. And man, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe somewhere down the road I can have you on for part 2. But if you don't mind, can we finish with a few minutes of kind of rapid fire questions?
Okay.
Just see what happens here. What are you listening to right now? What do you have on the turntable right now?
I reflect on a lot of music, man, from my life. And recently losing Pharoah Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to Pharoah with John Coltrane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Peace on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things he did live in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The Temple University concert. Meditations.
Mm-hmm.
Some of Pharoah's music, Thembe, and some other dates that he did that were so spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
That's some things I've listened to recently that are inspiring, and his dynamic power and force and how he believed in himself taught me a lot growing up, You know, my dad had that record, Meditations.
Nice.
That was part of his collection, which was incredible.
Incredible.
To hear my dad listening to that record.
Yeah.
You know, I'd come home, you know, my dad'd be down in the basement and he would be practicing or doing something. And I was upstairs, and then all of a sudden I'd hear him listening to a record like that, you know? And man, Kulu Say Mama was another one that he listened to a lot. And that was amazing. I would come downstairs and be like, wow. And I'd sit away from him. He'd be closer to the record player. And that's when I really heard Elvin Jones and Coltrane playing duets and things, you know. And so sometimes I reach back into that, you know, but some of Keith Jarrett's latest releases, the solo piano concerts from his last tours that he did.
Yeah.
I've
About
been
the young cats. Who are some of the young cats that you listen to now?
well, you know, I listen to all the young cats in all these forum classes and teaching through the year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So people that I've felt I feel a part of their development. I'm really proud of cats, man, like Tony Malaby, for example, you know. And as far as saxophone players, but
have you caught Emmanuel Wilkins?
Emmanuel, I love the way he's playing, man. He's someone that I've met. We never worked together yet, you know, but he's a real player, man.
Yeah.
You know, and I heard him on a live stream from the Vanguard with Kenny Barron. I think it was the first time he might have played with Kenny during the pandemic, you know. And Kenny really embraced him, man.
Oh yeah.
Man, they played so beautiful together. It was like so great that was really the first time I really heard him and saw him play, because it was a Zoom performance from the Vanguard, you know. Yeah.
Right on, man.
That young piano player, Emmett Cohen, who's doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
I went up and played a live stream from his pad.
Gotcha.
That was fantastic with a nice, beautiful rhythm section. These cats that he's been playing with, you know.
Nice.
So I've played with most of the folks that are on the scene today, you know.
And you played with everybody.
Well, you know, having like 9/11 was my first day teaching at Berkeley with the Gary Burton chair that I'm the first to hold. And that was in 2001. And then in 2009 with the Global Jazz Institute with Danilo Perez, John Patitucci, and Terry Lynn, I moved into that with them, you know. So through the years, it's been amazing to address the future in the music.
Yeah.
I feel really involved with the current scene of all the players on the scene today. You know?
Yeah, right on, man.
It's always surprising me, you know, like really surprised. I played the Newport Festival this last year with my Trio Tapestry, and man, I was surrounded with like all of these young, incredible, inspired players that were all coming to say hello to me, and folks that I kind of knew their name, but I never really met them yet, you know?
Yeah.
And it felt so good. I went to the little dressing room and I was like, wow, dig that, man. That's something. People are paying attention, and you cross generations in this music, you know? It's like you live in this multi-generational world that is a blessing.
And jazz is alive and well, that's for sure, man. So many great young cats playing today. Well, listen, Joe, let me just lay two more questions on you. The two questions I always ask my guest at the end of these sessions. They're pretty heavy questions. As you and I are getting up in years, it's something you have to look at. You have to think about your own mortality. And it's always interesting to me to ask people what their own conception or idea is about what happens when we do pass. What do you think happens?
Well, living through losing so many people throughout my lifetime, I think that what happens is that the spirits loom large. Losing my dad, 1987, was like traumatic and really difficult for all of us, my family. But you know, he's larger today than he was then, in a way.
Yeah.
For me, you know. And I think I could speak for my brothers and my sister too, like my mom. And, you know, people that you lose, you realize that their spirits live on. And especially when it's for good, you know. So I don't know, you know, what happens to us when we transition. But I think that you never really leave. You're always here.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker is here.
He's here. Yeah.
Coltrane.
Monk. Monk is here.
Thelonious is here, like unbelievable.
Amen.
You know, but you have to be hip to it.
Right.
You don't know. You might not feel that, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cats who don't feel that, but I really I embrace the spirituality about the music and life. And I think like especially the goodness of humanity and things that live on. And if you could try to project that beauty and that love throughout your lifetime, that's what I want to try to do, you know.
Beautiful. And last question, Joe, when you do pass, what do you hope people say about you? What do you hope people are saying, you know, when you're not here physically?
Well, you know, I hope they would realize that I was as honest as I could be, and that I was always trying to be as humane and generous and full of gratitude, and that was all about sharing the blessings for me. You know, I mean, I hope people can feel that, and you know, to realize also that, you know, it's serious. It's serious. Your lifetime is a serious thing, you know, and not to just be a thrill seeker. You know? Try to live in the cosmos while you're grounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
With humankind, you know. And I don't know, you know, being around Ornette Coleman and certain folks, man, through the years, Hank Jones and Paul, people that like really, Elvin, you know, I mean, Elvin Jones, man, it was amazing to have his embrace and to realize what he gave everyone, you know, just as a natural, you know, a natural expressive human, you know. Dizzy.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah, Dizzy.
Humanitarian aspects about like sharing the blessings and embracing things. So like you channel where you've been. You haven't been anywhere, then you're not going to be able to channel anything, you know. But a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of young, old souls out here, you know. There's a lot of mystery going on in life, and to embrace humanity and try to share that. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to live by. Knowing Sonny Rollins a little bit and having some talks with him these years has taught me a lot about all kinds of things, man.
Mhm.
Having Sonny's embrace and wisdom and as part of my life has meant a lot. God bless Sonny Rollins.
God bless Sonny Rollins. And the new, have you seen the new biography that's about 1,000 pages long? It's I'm about a third of the way in. Man, everything's in that book. It's beautiful.
I'm so thrilled to have been asked to write a little blurb that's
Right.
it's on the back cover. It's like,
Yeah.
that happened, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing to read about Sonny's life.
It
and
is.
A way, like I really was listening to all of the music along his journey, man. Like the music he was recording at the same times he was going through all kinds of social issues, you know, the heavy lessons, deep.
Yeah.
And if you could do that, like, you know, I have a nice collection of Sonny Rollins, and it was amazing to read and listen and read, and that's part of my quote, you know, on the back. And that's something else, man. That's
Sonny was an inspiration, and as are you, Joe. And hey, you've been generous with your time. I'm really thrilled and honored that you took this time to connect. I appreciate it very much. I wish you all the best. And I have so many questions here that I didn't get to. I hope that maybe sometime down the road we can have part 2 of this. But as we start off in 2023, I wish you all the best. Have a great year.
Yeah, John. Beautiful.
And thank you again so much, Joe.
Great. My new release is coming out with Trio Tapestry, Marilyn Crispell, Carmen Castaldi this spring. And it's called Our Daily Bread, and it's a prayer-like piece of music.
Beautiful. And I will put links in the show notes to this so people can find you and find the gigs that you're playing and find the music you're making. And again, it's been an honor, and thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
Take care.